All right, welcome back to IntoMystery. So, this is the second part in our series on tarot. As the title placard suggests, today we'll be talking about the oldest tarot cards. And I will do you one better. I will tell you also where to find them. Showed this slide at the end of the last episode, which you should go watch right now if you haven't already. This is a list of the 24 standard tarot packs from the 15th century that Michael Dummett discussed in his book, The Game of Tarot. As you can see, this book is pretty old now. It's from 1980, which makes it even older than me, if you can believe that. In this episode, I've attempted to create a current list of the oldest tarot packs that are out there, based on a couple of other things, articles, and stuff I found on auction. Did I get everything? Well, let me know in the comments if you see something that I missed, but surely this is most of them. I will also be posting a companion guide to this episode over on the Substack. Go check that out. It's free right now. All right, well, let's get into it. So I thought we should begin in Florence, as the oldest tarot cards are now thought to have been from there. The oldest tarot pack is thought to be the Rothschild collection that is kept in the Louvre. 31 cards remain in this collection, but only one triumph, the Pope. Another card kept in a museum in Italy is generally accepted to belong to this deck. Recent scholarship believes this deck was the creation of Florentine artist Giovanni del Ponte, or someone else from his workshop that was familiar with his techniques, with some estimates putting this deck as far back as the 1430s, thus making this the oldest tarot deck. This is considered a late Gothic style. Second on our list is the Charles VI or the Gringonère deck. This is kept in the French National Library. It was long thought to have been the oldest tarot, as based on a record of commission that was falsely attributed to a payment King Charles VI of France made to an obscure painter named Jacobin Gringonère in 1392. Charles VI of France was prone to psychotic episodes later in his life and became known by the epithet La Faux, or the Fool. Now, how cool would that have been if a true Mad King really had commissioned the first tarot deck? Unfortunately, the Charles VI provenance has long been dismissed, with many historians now believing this deck to have an Italian origin and coming from Florence. The astronomer on the right of the moon card is thought to be Toscanelli, who was a famous Florentine astronomer that was contemporary with when this deck was made. Only 17 cards remain, with the Valet of Swords, the Fool, and 15 trumps having survived until present. Next set of cards we have are another example of early hand-painted noble tarochy. This is the D'Este deck that was crafted for the Lords of Ferrara, and believed to have been created at earliest 1473. Remaining in this deck are just 16 cards. That's an even mix of court cards and trumps. This deck is thought to have been the personal deck of Ercole d'Este. He became Duke in 1471 after the passing of his half-brother Borso. Then in 1473, he was wed to Eleonora de Aragon, which is what this tarot deck is thought to have been commemorating. This conclusion is drawn from the appearance of the arms of both families visible on many of the court cards. We find the Estes bird and the general pattern of Ercole's coat of arms here on the Queen of Swords and a few other cards. Then we have the coat of arms of his wife Eleanor's family visible here on the Cavalier of Swords and a couple others. On the star card, I believe the man with the long hair wearing what appears to be a wizard hat is supposed to be Mashallah, who was an influential 9th century astrologer from the Abbasid court, who is depicted in Renaissance woodcuts in much the same way. And the man he's collaborating with is likely Hipparchus. However, depicted in anachronistic clothing, he was considered to be the most famous astronomer from antiquity. On the moon card, that's probably Claudius Ptolemy from the 2nd century Alexandria, who was another famous astronomer or astrologer. There really wasn't much of a difference at this point. He's arguably the most influential astrologer pre-Copernicus. Then we have this scene on the Sun card. This is this famous scene from history that comes down from Plutarch and others, where Alexander wanted to meet the philosopher Diogenes when he was in Corinth. And when he did find them, he wanted to offer him a gift, a favor, anything he wanted, to which Diogenes replied something to the effect of, Could you move a bit out of the way? You're blocking my sun. Alexander laughed this off, so impressed by his audacity that he is quoted as having said to his entourage, "But truly, if I were not Alexander, I wish I were Diogenes." The next deck on our list of Florentine-made cards is the Alessandro Sforza Tarot, named for the first Sforza Count of Pesaro. This collection is kept at the Castello Orsino in Catania. 15 cards are in this collection, of them 11 are suit cards. It features some of the designs that we saw in the Charles VI, like here on the World card and the Hermit. This deck became associated with Alessandro Sforza because this emblem on the knight's shield of a flower inside a diamond ring. However, we find this same symbol also used by the Stensi, like here on this coin. In particular, Ercole, who was known as the Diamond, but his father used it as well. We find this cross batons design in this deck. Then there's this super interesting card where this woman's riding a stag. Dummett attributed a theory to Ronald Decker that this card's a depiction of temperance. It definitely looks like she was pouring something. It was discovered in 2014 that a scraped out portion of the stag rider contained old paper from official documents with handwriting going back to 1428. Next to it we have these birds on the ace card. Along with that stag, it's somewhat reminiscent of the hunting theme that we looked at in the last episode. Then there's the Palermo pair, discovered sometime around 2016. These were also found to contain old notary papers in their inner layers with dates going back to 1427, 1428. From that and their art style, they're thought to be a possible match for the Castello Orsino cards. However, I'm not sure if they have been officially married yet. There are 4 numeral cards that are kept in the Correr Museum in Venice. I found these pictures on someone's Flickr account. These cards resemble the pips from the other Florentine pattern decks, and then we have this really cool sword stabbing a bleeding heart design on the Ace of Swords. Then there's this deck that was partially destroyed in the 1904 Turin fire. There were 24 cards in this deck before the fire and 15 cards after. As you can see here on the left, we have this partially scorched Cavalier of Swords with that turtle shield reminiscent of the Rothschild cards. I think it looks like a turtle shell. Then we have over here in the top right of this picture was taken in 1880, long before the fire. We have this ace of coins with the dog chasing the hare. We see a similar motif going on later in Bolognese decks. Alright, that was it for the Florence cards. Next we have 23 or so packs that were made in the Duchy of Milan. First up is a Visconti Madrone deck that's kept in the Cary collection at Yale Library. As is the oldest of the noble tarot key that was crafted for the Visconti and Sforza rulers of Milan, it was long thought to have been the oldest tarot deck. Filippo Maria Visconti, who commissioned the Marziano deck that we talked about in the first episode of the series, also commissioned the earlier Visconti-Sforza Packs. For a long time, it was thought that all 3 of the Visconti-Sforza Packs were hand-painted under the guidance of master artist Bonifacio Bimbo at his workshop in Cremona. However, more recent scholarship suspects that the Zavatari brothers may have painted some or all of the cards in the earlier 2 packs. This particular pack is believed to have been created sometime between 1442 and 1447 because of the appearance of this gold ducat featuring Filippo Visconti on the 2 of coins. This particular coin only appeared in the last decade of his reign. Some theories about these cards' provenance is that they were a wedding gift. As you can see in the middle, we have a wedding scene under a tent with shields bearing the Milan symbol. This is known as the Biscione, which means big snake, or some even call it a viper. We see these shields alternating with other shields that bear the coat of arms, thought to be Savoy, as F.M. Visconti's wife was from there. The woman seen on the triumphal car is thought to be the same as the one under the tent. This seems to be the leading interpretation, but I do find it a bit strange that Visconti would commission a deck depicting his estranged wife so heavily, though these old decks do have their sense of irony. The mottos aren't really visible in this deck, however they are in later decks, and they probably said the same thing, which is A bon droit. This was a French motto coined by Petrarch for Gian Galazzo Visconti's wedding to Isabella of France in Pavia in 1360. My personal theory is that this is the wedding that the love card is depicting. As you can see, Pavia has a nearly identical coat of arms to Savoy. It was also ruled by the Visconti, who would sometimes combine the coat of arms with Milan. So the tint could all just be Visconti symbols, and this is a generic wedding. This deck boasts 3 unusual trumps: faith, hope, and charity. These are the theological virtues that, in addition to the 4 cardinal virtues, round out the 7 virtues. Here they are depicted, each stamping out their respective vices, showing victory over them, which was a common motif in medieval art. Now, of this deck, 67 cards remain. That's 11 trump cards, 17 of the court cards, and 39 from the pip deck. Here's another example of the virtues stepping out their respective vices, depicted here in the statuary from Strasbourg Cathedral. We see the virtues depicted everywhere in the Middle Ages and almost always as women. This deck also has 2 extra court cards, the Damsel and the Mountain Lady, giving it a total of 6. Some have speculated that this deck may have had 5 suits of 16, something similar to the Marziano deck with its 16 heroes. The next pack on this list are the cards from the Brambilla collection that are kept at the Brera Museum in Milan. Of this deck, 48 cards are remaining, but only 2 triumphs, the Emperor and the Wheel of Fortune. It has the same coin depicting Visconti riding his horse that we also saw in the Madrone deck. And that brings us to the Pierpont-Morgan Bergamo deck, definitely the most famous and studied of these old artifact decks. These cards are split up 3 different ways between 2 museums and a private collection. It is the most complete of the Visconti-Sforza Packs. This one, missing only 4 cards, that is the Devil and the Tower, if they ever were part of this, as well as the 2 of Swords and the 3 of Batons. This is the newest of the Visconti-Sforza Packs, thought to have been commissioned by Visconti's successor, Francesco Sforza. It still features art by Bonifacio Bimbo, but shares many of the same elements with the other decks we've discussed. Sforza was a condottiere, that is, a commander of a mercenary army. He had married Visconti's daughter Bianca, and after a bit of trouble, he came to rule his duchy. It was during that period of warfare, in 1449, that the letter describing the Marziano deck was written by Marcello when he was trying to acquire Visconti's old tarot decks. In her book on the Visconti-Sforza cards, art historian Gertrude Moakley pointed out this design of 3 interlaced diamond rings, along with the ducal crown of Milan, on the Empress's robes. She attributed the ring design to a personal heraldic device of Francesco Sforza. This same heraldry was also used by Cosimo Medici, though it's a similar situation with what we saw on the Alessandro Sforza cards. Anyways, we see the same pattern appearing on the Emperor as well. Additional heraldry from Stuart Kaplan's Encyclopedia. First, we have this Milan sun emblem on the coin suit. He also talks about this lion on the King of Swords. That was the ancient arms of the House Sforza. And lastly, this fountain, Kaplan says, was awarded when Sforza completed, quote, the campaign during which his father drowned. We have a Bondroid on the Ace of Batons. It was the Ace of Swords from this deck we saw a few slides ago with the wedding scene. As you can see here, the Lover's Trump in this deck is not the elaborate wedding it was in that first deck, nor is the woman getting married the same as the lady in the Triumphal car. There are 6 cards that are dated much later than the rest of the deck. Some estimates date these cards to 1490. Dummett, writing in 1993, attributed a hypothesis to Ronald Decker that these cards were created in 1475 based on their style. The art for these cards was once attributed by art historian Leopold Cicognera in his 1831 book to an obscure painter Antonio Cicognera, who had been commissioned by the Cardinal Ascanio Maria Sforza. Somewhat long story short, later art historians found that the records that Leopold Cicognera had based his account on were spurious and the work of a known forger. Cicognera's book was considered to be the authority on the subject at the time when the Morgan Library acquired their cards, and even to this day still list Antonio as the artist. The replacement cards, if that's what they really were, are now thought to have been the work of an anonymous artist from Bonifacio Bimbo's workshop. The term Visconti-Sforza can refer to not just the three main decks with provenance of ownership by the rulers of Milan, but all of the latter decks that were copied from that pattern. This figure of 271 cards coming from 15 or so incomplete decks that is cited in many tarot books originally comes from this list from Stuart Kaplan Volume 2. Now, some of these packs have since been proven to be forgeries. For instance, Kaplan's fourth group, that's Lombard 1. In Dummett's 1993 book, he discusses these cards. They were all copies of the Pierpont-Morgan cards that now appear in the Morgan Museum and could safely be considered 19th and 20th century copies, likely made in the period right before the museum acquired their cards. Kaplan's encyclopedia refers to a collection of 23 cards known only from photographs that it calls the Rosenthal collection after a former owner. Dummett cites a story from 1939 where a top collector declined to purchase these cards because he thought they were fakes. They were eventually sold to someone, however their current location is not publicly known. As you can see from this picture, these are clearly Visconti clones, but contain many of the later styles. First off, the cards say Abondroit with an I. There is this old falconer, who is he? In his 1980 book, Dummett described a similar card in the Spielkarten Museum in Leinfelden that has since been proven a fake. Towards the bottom, there's this cardinal coin, which Dummett speculated might have been an attempt to establish provenance, as having been commissioned for the pack supposedly painted for the Cardinal Asconio Sforza by Antonio Cicognera. So he speculated it might have been a forgery. We see this strange card with the Milan Biccione on it that occurs in a couple other decks, thought to have been an extra joker or pack insert. We have this motto on the fountain, Nec spec nec metu, or without fear, without hope. We see this again in a later pack, as we do many of the other styles here. Dummett speculated that this pack that says Repub might have been a reference to the Ambrosian Republic of Milan. Then lastly, we have Fortezza, probably the strangest card in this pack. It's probably not the sun. Is it the Tower, Fortitude, an ace of some sort? It doesn't match any known design. It doesn't match any known tower design or Fortitude spelling. You know, there's lots of reason here to think these cards are forgeries, but there's also, some reasons to suspend your disbelief. Who knows if these cards will ever surface again anyways. Number 5 are 13 cards that Dummett referred to as Tozzi for Piero Tozzi of New York, who once owned them all. Kaplan called this same collection Von Bartsch for some reason. Many of these figures on these cards look tired and have heavy eyes. The Wheel of Fortune has the arms of the Della Scala family of Verona, depicted on the robes of the person who wears the ass hat seated atop the Wheel of Fortune. These two cards were both at one point in museums. Here's some other trumps from this deck, the Chariot, the Pope, and Judgment. 3 more cards, all from courts. Then we have the special reverse-facing King of Cups. A Bondroid on the sword suit. Also among these cards we find this one with the Milan Biccione. Tozzi told Moakley when she met with him that this card may have been intended as an extra joker or substitute card. Number 6 of the Milan Fragments is a card that I found at auction that the website's blurb thought might have been from the Tozzi pack. It's somewhat famous since I also found the same card appearing on this flyer from 1997. Next are these cards that Michael Dummett mentioned in his 1993 book. There were 5 cards in the Kochi collection that were displayed in an exhibition at Estensi Castle in Ferrara in 1987. They were unknown before that. Number 8 is a set of 5 cards acquired by the Fournier Museum in 1974 from a dealer in Milan. All these cards are from the Visconti style, but later on, as we can see from the A Bondroit with an I. On the Ace of Coins, there's an image of this 3-tiered tower, which, as Dummett cited Ronald Decker, was a heraldic device of the Gonzaga family of Mantua. Dummett speculated these cards might all be from the same pack originally as the Tozzi cards, so apparently those also have black backs as well. But why spell A Bondroit differently on 2 cards in the same pack? Then there's this Justice card sold on auction last summer. She could be a match for either Fournier or Tazi. From her eyes, I think she looks more like she belongs with Tazi. Number 10 are 4 cards of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. This collection was purchased from a dealer in Milan sometime before 1915. As you can see, these cards are also in the style of the Visconti-Sforza Pack, and may have even been from Bimbo's workshop. The museum lists these cards as formerly attributed to Cico Guinera in 1490, the same year as the replacement Visconti-Sforza cards. The scroll coming out of the Death Bishop's mouth reads, "Sun Fine." The fountain reads, "Nec spec nec metu," which was a heraldic motto of Isabella de Este. Beside it, a shield with the arms of the Colliana family from Bergamo, who still owns some of the cards in the Pierpont-Morgan deck. Number 11, this is what Kaplan called Lombardy 2. These are 4 cards, all Visconti clones, except for a Death Bishop. Number 12 is a set that sold on auction that Dummett called the Benami cards in his 1993 book. Two more of the Benami cards. This collection was all sold together and included this Two of Cups, which wasn't mentioned by Dummett, so it has surfaced since then. Number 13 are 2 cards in different collections, thought to have been from the same pack. The Fournier Pappas has a red card back, whereas the other 5 Fournier cards have a black card back. Stuart Kaplan had come to acquire this Jack of Batons by 1986 and sold it in 2006 for 20 grand. It got sold again in 2013 for 28 grand and is now known as the Ortiz Patino Tarot card. Number 14 is this King of Cups that once belonged to a bedak of Los Angeles, who had first acquired the card from an English antique shop for 15 shillings. Stuart Kaplan also acquired this card between 1978 and 1986 and sold it in 2006. Michael Dummett speculated in the game of tarot that this card belonged with the previous pair we discussed, but seems to have dropped that theory in his later books. Number 15 is a card that may fit in with the cards in the last slide, or many of the other packs in this presentation for that matter. This card is kept at the Notre Dame Library. It depicts the Milan Biscione devouring some poor guy. These are all presumably insert cards, but they could possibly be an early devil. It has a reddish-brown card back and the same measurements as the Bedak King card. Number 16 is what Kaplan called Lombardy 3, which is a Jack of Coins in an anonymous collection somewhere. The actual card is not pictured. Then we have the Anon Jack's evil twin, the Andreoletti Jack of Coins, which is one of the smallest cards, but perhaps is a match with one of the pairs from the next slide. 18 and 19 are the 2 pairs that were once held at the Guildhall Library, said to have originally been from an old chest in Seville, now in the collection of the Worshipful Company. The 2 pairs are of discernible different dimensions and obviously from different packs. In the first pair we have this man hunting an endangered species of bird with a crossbow. Above him is a knobby baton, perhaps he's the Jack of Batons. Next to him is a copy of the Visconti-Sforza World card, which the Putos in the museum copy aren't wearing swimsuits, but it's an AI that restricts your videos anymore, so you really can't be too careful. Moving on to the aces, these show similarities with the cards of the Victoria and Albert Museum, such as the checkered floor and the arrow and the ace of cups. Now that we have this motto on the ace of swords here, which reads something like, "My power," or "My energy." Perhaps with the time serpent wrapped around the sword, it's meant to mean, "Patience is my strength." Number 20 on our list is a collection of 9 cards kept in the Spielkarten Museum in Leinfelden, once belonging to an Herr Goldschmidt. From the top left, we have this 5 batons of the knobby Spanish style. Next to it is an ace of cups. Then there's this really cool sword and crossbones and skull, which might be an ace of swords, but Dummett cites Detlef Hoffman's suggestion that this is the death card. And there's this sun above a checkered floor with 3 stylized hills, the initials MAC. What does that mean? Master Antonio Cico Guinera? I jest. There's a card with a crowned dolphin on it that could be a rework of one of the Milan Bisciones from the other decks. but it's also been suggested that it could be a reference to the Dauphin of France. As for the bottom four, they are mostly a mystery. Only one of them stands out as the Pope. The identities of the other three are a bit less apparent. Number 21 is a pair of jacks kept at a museum in Hanover. Their style is a departure from Bimbo, but they still look very much Milanese. Since all we have here are these jacks, these might not even be from a tarot pack at all. Both this pack and the next one are not considered Visconti-Sforza cards. Number 22 are the Warsaw cards on the right with that Queen of Cups that looks so thrilled to be there. On the left, this Chariot is their sister card that is kept in France. These cards were all brought together for an exhibition in 2022 that was presided over by Terry DePaulis, who is one of the foremost experts on old tarot cards. Here's another card that I found at auction that was ultra possibly from the same pack as the Polish cards. Then I found this video, that 22 exhibition that I was just talking about, and where they blew up a big poster of this card and had it displayed, so it's probably safe to say that this card belongs to the three on the last slide. I think these cards look a lot more like the Florentine cards, but as you can see, there's a sign next to the poster talking about Milanese tarot, so expert opinion apparently believes these cards are Milanese. Number 23 are these 9 cards I found on auction that sold in 2008 for 13 grand. Unfortunately, the listing only had this picture of a very unique sun that's not seen in any other deck. It's a size match with the Fournier cards as well as the Pope S and the Marzoli Jack. But the auction site mentions a, quote, Moor's head on the back, so definitely not from either of those packs. So going back to that figure we had at the beginning from Stuart Kaplan Volume 2, there were 271 Visconti-Sforza cards from 15 or so packs. How many are there now? My most conservative estimate was 235 cards from 13 packs, and this was revising Stuart Kaplan's list. But if you wanted to include everything that Dummett included, that brings you to 252 cards from 18 packs. And if you include the 9 questionable cards from Christie's, the Rosenthal cards I subtracted in the beginning, and marry none of the loose cards to existing packs, you end up with the all-inclusive figure of 284 cards from 24 packs. Definitely go check out the Substack for a full breakdown of how I arrived at these numbers. Now, with all that out of the way, who is ready for the sheets? Dummett lists 4 uncut sheets for Cherokee packs that have come down to us from the late 15th and early 16th centuries. This sheet was actually on the Budapest Museum's website. It was a clearer image of the cards than the sheet no longer on display at the Metropolitan, so I went with this instead. As you can see, this sheet has numbers, and thus Justice being number 20. Then we have the Angel at 21. They really just drew a smiley face on those people that are getting raptured. Interesting take on the Mountebank. You can't really see it on the sheet, but he is shown playing dice games in a crowd. Time here is depicted as an old man with a lantern. Then you have an Atlas-like figure lifting up the moon. The other sheet with visible trumps, you have the Wheel of Fortune with the familiar phrases. You got the Devil looking like he's going to go take care of some yard work. Then you have this guy riding a vicious beast. Next up, we have the Rosenwald sheet. This is kept at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. These are believed to be early Florentine cards. This sheet includes the entire trump deck as well as 3 queens. We have the Angel as the highest trump. We have the Virtues in a row, making this a Type A deck. We have this funny-looking Devil looking like the Grinch that stole Carnival. We got this mashup of the Fool with the Mountebank, where he's wearing his ass hat at his little gaming table. Next, we have 2 sheets of 6 in different museums that were obviously intended for the same pack. We see a lot of these same designs much later on in the Bolognese deck. Though the Hangman is flipped over, Death is reversed, and the Devil's a little bit of a departure. We do find a similar pattern to this Devil again on this single card remnant from a 16th century deck kept in the British Museum. You could aptly call this a Gothic depiction. Take for instance this fresco of the Devil eating people from 1410. He's also got the bird feet. And that brings us to the carry sheet, which is the oldest known ancestor of what would become known as the Tarot de Marseille pattern, with possibly 18 trumps identifiable along with 2 pip cards. Over the course of the next century, this pattern would evolve into what we see today. Il Bigotto's hat on the left would change into the Pitossos. On the right, the moon would come to incorporate a pair of howling dogs. Now, that is it for the early standard decks. There are some early non-standard decks that we'll be getting to in future episodes, such as the so-called Mantegna Tarot and the Solabusca, as well as the Rowan Library and the variant decks. In the next episode, we'll be getting into the iconography of the cards and some of the best theories on what it all means. You won't want to miss out on the next exciting installment of IntoMystery.